Black Hills Information Security, the leaders in penetration testing and active defense. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to request a quote today. Threat Connect is the industry's most widely adopted threat intelligence platform, built to unite the people, processes, and technologies across your security team, your organization, and your entire ecosystem of partners. Threat Connect's threat intelligence platform enables your team to collaborate, analyze, and make sense of threat data all in one place. Empower your team towards fast and efficient analysis that leads to decisive action. Transform your entire threat detection and response program today. Claim your free account at threatconnect.com/securityweekly. Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries and enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge of the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries at the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame, automate the hunt. Welcome back, everyone, to Security Weekly. I'm here with Jack and Joff, where I am going to foster a technical discussion, as it were, or a technical segment even, on the considerations for using Intel SGX. Jack, Joff, have you heard of Intel SGX? It's been roughly a year since it was announced.
You know, I'm guilty of saying no. I actually have not done any reading on the technology, but I'm very interested in your technical segment now. So.
Yeah, good. So it's interesting. This security technology is attached to the Skylake family of processors. Skylake, of course, came out last October. And it extends even into, from what I understand, the 7th generation Intel processors, which is very timely as I look at. It's not really security related, but as I look at buying a new laptop, I want to just kill Apple. I've turned into the desktop is not anyway.
Yeah, I really. I'm
really disappointed.
I don't know what they're doing.
In any case, if you're looking to protect applications in a trusted computing model, and it's interesting after looking into SGX, I really understand the kind of double-edged sword that trusted computing represents. I see there was a Bruce Potter that was talking about trusted computing a while back. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel that like Bruce was referencing, but I can also see some of the bad things that's happening. So I just want to run through some bullet points and then open it up for a little bit of discussion with Jack and Joff. I really like this kind of comparison because I think it really, and this came from NCC Group, it really kind of, I thought, got to the heart and soul of Intel's SGX, which is a newer method of implementing trusted computing in hardware. So they say architecturally, Intel SGX is a little different from ARM Trusted Zone. With Trusted Zone, we often think of a CPU which is in two halves, right? The secure world and the insecure world. Communication with the secure world occurs from the insecure world via an SMC or secure monitor call instruction. In Intel SGX model, we have one CPU which can have many secure enclaves or islands. And that really, to me, kind of explained it best in that rather than just splitting the CPU into secure and insecure, we have all these little enclaves or islands that are independent applications and data running inside of their own little enclaves that are secure. So the thing with Intel SGX is you have to develop software specifically to implement this level of protection. Then, like I said, the code and associated data would be protected during execution, even if an attacker theoretically gained administrator privileges on the box, they would not be able to gain access to the application with some exceptions there, obviously, which I'll talk about, and more specifically the data within that application. Currently, as far as I understand, and there is a messaging broker system that's kind of an add-on to this, which lends itself to its own security concerns. But you can only currently write apps in C or C++ that implement Intel SGX. Now, everyone accessing the applications would need to run the software and hardware on systems that support Intel SGX. So if Jack and I, for example, were to write an application that we wanted to provide security from all different attack vectors, ideally, I have a system with a processor that supports SGX, which is a processor released in the past year. Jack has the same hardware. We both write our application so that it implements SGX in our own environments. We're running in that protected space. If we do that, that's the best case scenario, because that means we can take advantage of the messaging system. I could query Jack's application and say, hey, are you using SGX and all of the appropriate encryption mechanisms? Jack would respond with a message and say yes. I would also respond with a message and say yes. And then we would know that we were both running really secure systems. So in that model, it has a lot of interesting applications. Specifically, if you were to think about the SWIFT network, what if all 11,000 financial institutions were to run that and do that level of checking? That would then provide a level of security that would be pretty good in that environment. However, it means that all parties have to be on the latest hardware, develop software that does that.
So you're talking about banking being on the latest hardware.
Yes, exactly.
I love the idea.
In my utopian world, Jack, this sounds fantastic, right? But step out of that world for a moment, right? If Jack and I wanted to have secure applications, ideally we could do that. And that's one of the benefits of this kind of trusted computing platform. And all people being on the latest hardware and newer software compiled with the technology, you can't say that with a straight face, right?
I mean, even the Bromium folks are struggling to get people with 6 or 7 year old processors to take advantage of the processor level virtualization.
So that's for the most part, that's the good news about SGX. It's a pretty cool technology.
Is cool, and it's one of those things that if I pretend I'm somebody else and try to be optimistic for a few minutes, as I've been doing things, looking back at history, looking back at older reports, older studies on security and computing, there were ideas that people had that maybe never got out of academia or never scaled beyond Multics or early systems that were government managed or huge corporation managed for narrow scope, that really weren't practical. But as we do things, as hardware advances, right? I mean, people complain, if you have modern hardware, you complain less about agents, for example, right?
Correct.
Yet if you were running Windows 98 and you had 3 agents on your desktops
with 4 gigs of RAM.
4 gigs? No, wait, 512K of RAM or whatever you had on your Windows.
A spinning hard
and a 4,200 RPM spinning hard drive, right?
You're right. There's something we said for security in modern hardware,
and so
certainly.
The machines
multiple cores,
unusable devices. Our phones are quad-core 64-bit boxes now, right? Now, granted, people who write mobile applications, if you write mobile applications, guess what? We all have 4 cores. Learn how to multitask, multi-thread, you ignorant bastards. But
I think it does breed lazy programmers in that respect with performance.
Developers for desktop and laptop environments have figured out how to use multiple cores. So you put a small agent on a machine, whether it's antivirus or backup or whoever's, or, Tenable's Nessus agent, whatever. You put a couple of them on. First of all, we're better at writing agents. The hardware supports it. It doesn't hurt. This hardware is letting us do things that were just theoretical years ago. So even though it's fun to, it's like, like banks are going to update everything, the reality is eventually this is going to move us forward. It's just that
to speak
we're
to
the
banking
from
issue too. Earlier this year, we saw those attacks on the SWIFT network that really raised awareness. Just that the IoT, botnets and stuff have been really raising awareness. And it's the same thing.
It's not like there were only 2 or 3 of those. It's just that people are looking for them. I think they're catching them faster. I assume that the SWIFT attacks are still happening, but they're not making the big scores, or they're not making as much news because it's... how horrible does something have to be to knock Brexit and the U.S. election off, right? I mean, it's just
yeah.
right.
Well,
But
just back a couple more points on SGX.
It's very cool. So in the future, I'll be optimistic.
Yeah. Well, no, let me just
I'll be dead in the future.
Let me just squash your optimism.
I'll be dead in the future.
My last 2 points are going to squash your optimism.
Okay, good.
Jack.
All right.
So the bad news here is that these SGX enclaves. And Joanna Rotuska has published papers and seems to fall in line with this. They're, in my research, they're kind of similar to firewalls. And
firewall's fault?
Very few of us deploy a firewall with any deny because we're like, oh, like stuff has to talk to each other. So you got this awesome application compiled with SGX and you're running it on the system and you're like, wait, it has to interact with other things to be useful.
Right.
So essentially, it has to open up holes in its firewall to allow communication between applications on the system.
Trust is problematic.
Yeah. And so the speculation is that attackers will exploit those same avenues to be able to compromise the integrity of SGX-based applications.
But that's been true time and time again with every one of these technologies that we've introduced. I would argue that even with the opportunities to exploit essentially messaging APIs to gain advantage from the attacker perspective, it's still a push forward, and any advance that we get there is a good advance. I think it's optimally any of these cross-messaging APIs that people write, be it at the firmware level, in the Intel case, or at the application level. That it's incumbent upon them to give good guidance to folks on how to appropriately use them, so that we try to avoid, if at all possible, the security issues related to that.
Yeah, like integrity only extends to a certain point, and that speaks to your point, Geoff, on implementation. Like you have to implement this properly. But the other thing too is, let's say the user has a really great password. They're using two-factor authentication. They're authorized to use this application. They authenticate to the application. They tell the application to do something specific. That application is protected. It's running in SGX, and it goes off and does its thing. Like the whole thing that it comes down to is, what if the user is compromised in some way? Like physically compromised. Someone has bribed that user to do something. That's a much harder thing to protect against. It always comes down to that user's credentials and authentication and authorization, if that's compromised, and if the user themselves is compromised. Protecting against that is not something that I think we can extend this technology to be able to cover. However, running inside of a computer in this process, it does afford, I think, to Josh's point, there are some protections that it has. However, the double-edged sword comes in now. SGX is a very well-documented, I don't know how well deployed that it is to this day, but it is very well documented. And what that means is, if I'm an attacker and I want to create malware, I can absolutely run it in an SGX enclave. And what that means is, by design, when I do that, the kernel and other applications won't have access to my malware. So what that means is I can essentially lock out antivirus and endpoint protection, to your point earlier, Jack. Those other endpoint systems are taking advantage of our newly found hardware that's always happy to run all these other programs. But now my malware is running in this protected enclave, and you can't shut it down because by design it's taking advantage of a processor level feature that's locking out the operating system, the kernel, and all other applications from preventing it from doing bad things. And that's an excellent point, Paul. I mean, it goes both ways, is what you're saying. Like any tool, it can be used for good or not so good. And it's a very true statement with any of the advances in technology that we have seen, in that it is used for both good and not good goals. And so I think given that, I think that's a very good point, which actually may end up weakening some of the controls for the goals of detection, right? And being able to prevent some of the issues that you're talking about, and so then we may be diluting the technology, which would be unfortunate.
One of the question I had, though, in your reading as you were looking for this tech segment, did you come across anything that spoke to how these enclaves in the processor and virtualization technology were interrelated?
I did not. However, the two articles, and you really could have asked any question that went beyond my level of comprehension, Joff, and I would have pointed you to the two articles that I put in the show notes because they were pretty.
Joff, I think you were just told to RTFM.
They were pretty. They were really thorough, especially the one from NCC Group and even the one from Virus Bulletin were really thorough in documenting exactly how this works and going into a lot more detail. Specifically, the one from NCC Group had some fantastic information. There's not a whole lot of information outside of Intel from themselves that is distilling down what SGX is doing. Of course, Intel has a lot of great documentation on how it works and how to implement it. They want to see adoption on it, and they've done what I think from a marketing perspective is a really good job of making the information available. However, I'm not so sure what the adoption rate has been. I did see references to GR security, the Linux kernel implementation, taking advantage of this as well. I think it should be, in my estimation, should be on people's roadmaps. I think it's also a reason to refresh your hardware and constantly refresh your hardware, largely because of the reasons that Jack talked about, that when we look at security that may require extra processing cycles or resources, having refreshed hardware at this point really, really helps you, especially now that we talk about things like SGX, which are built into the hardware. That really helps you implement security.
If only the new MacBook Pros actually had real processors and RAM. Oh.
Yeah.
If they actually use the 7th generation rather than the 6th generation.
Wow. Okay.
Look, I'm throwing that grenade as someone who is committed to dumping Windows 10 because as a road warrior, it doesn't work for me. And it's like, I'm trying to give you money. Stop. Just stop making me hate you.
So we're kind of done with SGX. Let me just jump on this
Wait, I got one last thing on that. For the record, every firewall I've deployed in the past, I don't know, decade has had any deny rule in it. There just might have been any
allow above
before,
right? Yeah, exactly. yeah. That's a good point.
Let's just be honest, right? You know,
that's a good point. Tell your auditors, well, look, I'm denying everything on the bottom. Everything's good, right? Yeah, I got my
everything on the bottom. Yes. I might know that UI better than you and have something hidden, and the only one you can read is the deny rule, but that would be wrong.
So it somewhat relates to the SGX discussion, right? In that when you're looking at a new laptop, for example, like I am, right? And you're considering, like, first I'm throwing Windows right out the window because I was telling the guys earlier, if I had a Windows laptop,
Windows up, don't. Yeah, I would. Windows up, don't.
I want to just run it over with my car repeatedly. So my choices then become, okay, let's find a good Linux laptop or something from Apple. The new something from Apple.
You're almost, I mean, you've hit puberty. You could have a BSD machine.
Whoa. Yeah, baby. He went there.
I don't know about that. I've run BSD in the past. Love it. Don't get me wrong. It's as your personal computing device.
Yeah, especially as a road warrior who connects to different shit.
Yeah.
No. I mean, except for OS X, right? Except for a Mac. I'm not sure how you run BSD.
Exactly.
As a road warrior.
What's interesting to me is being on the latest. If I'm going to put it this way, if I'm going to put an investment into a laptop, we've talked about some of the new security technologies that are available. I want to put it into the latest and greatest thing. Apple has come out and said, well, we're 6th generation. And oh, by the way, we're limited to 16 gigs of RAM, which is not, I mean, in their defense, the 13-inch options that are out there, for the most part, are pretty much limited to Dell's offering is that XPS 13 Developer Edition, which is also limited to 16 gigs of RAM.
And that's not the flyweight thing that Apple offers, right? I mean,
I don't know, dude. Like, so I saw something that was like, hey, like the weight that you save by buying the new MacBook Pro, you're going to have to carry so many dongles
yes.
that you're going to spend more money, and the weight that's going to, and the space it's going to take up is totally. Yeah,
Right.
they've made a great laptop if all you want to do is just look at the screen and not be able to charge it at all.
And it's a beautiful screen.
Oh, God.
It's
Really? I mean, how much difference could you have between the screens that we have now that we're looking at our laptops?
Let me put on my glasses. Does that answer your question?
I don't put that really high. But, well, in the part of that is in Apple's defense. In Apple's defense, when I get to my office, I use an iMac, which has a gorgeous display.
Right. Well, the things that you look at on the internet. I mean, do you really want to see those people that close up?
Yeah, I don't know if I need to see that level of detail.
Yeah,
then you're seeing things that maybe can't be unseen.
Yeah, it's
the analogy of when when HDTV came out and it was like, oh my God, can somebody blur my features a little bit? I don't want to see this.
So I was looking at System 76. They make some great, I don't know, mixed review Linux laptops. Mostly positive, but there are some mixed reviews out there, and that goes across multiple generations. However, they're offering the latest 7th generation processor on their 14-inch, which you can get 32 gigs of RAM in.
Great.
I'm almost willing to take a gamble to get that extra RAM because I want to run VMware on it.
Well, see, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Paul, you just hit on it. Any of us in the information security community that are road warriors, or whatever our primary laptop is or desktop is, it can't be a desktop first of all, but we need RAM, we need disk because all of us are running umpteen virtual machines on it, and we've got to have a little bit more than the average.
And I think with the MacBook Pro, if you bought like at least 8 dongles, you could probably charge your laptop and have an external drive connected at the same time.
I think there's a split, Joff, which is that if you can count on connectivity and don't need high bandwidth connectivity, you can rely on cloud apps to deliver things.
That's a good.
Right,
Jack is sending us right to the cloud.
Right, so
cloud computing. Drink.
If the ubiquitous internet connectivity that people promised a decade ago and is still a lie today were real, something like the iPad Pro or whatever the high-end iPad is would work for all sorts of shit except for the
if I have a USB device that I need to use Windows on, the cloud doesn't really help me.
Right. And so that's part of my thing of finally giving up on Windows. Eventually, when Apple gives me a machine with a processor, because my son is a Windows guy because that's his world, but it's like he changed jobs recently, and they're like, "You want a MacBook Pro?" He's like, "I hate the fruit stuff." He spent years at big box retailers fixing Macs from people who swore they were impervious.
Fixing fruit.
But they were like, so have you ever tried virtualizing OS X on a Windows box? He's like, I'll take the MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can pretend to be Windows on a MacBook Pro really easily. You
sure
can't pretend to be OS X. And the poor boy does support, which,
yeah, no.
As long as I'm on tangents, fuck. So one of the questions you always get asked is, how are you getting into this industry? Man, I hate to tell you all this, but take a support job. Not Windows desktop support. Nobody deserves that. But,
but you should. No, you should.
You should take a support role. First of all, you get
even if it's Windows. I know.
Even if it is Windows.
No, I disagree with you. I think you should take a Windows desktop support role.
Not for long, but if you take a support role in a security company, what they're usually looking for is people who have done network admin, systems admin stuff, right? And that's like the kind of people that are always asking how to get into security. It's, take a support. I don't want to be. It's really the difference is if you're the IT person at a small company or one of the IT people at a larger company, you're never off the clock. Right? If you're supporting a security product, you're off and off the clock. but you get a great deal of exposure, and then it moves you in there. So just as long as I'm talking about people doing support shit, it is a great step into what we do.
So
no, he's absolutely
hold
right.
on, John.
I mean, if you want to get on the on-ramp, take a support job. That's how you get in there, and you get to trial by fire, like thrown in the deep end. You're going to learn it.
And you learn who you want to work for and who you don't.
You sure do.
So, I like how we transitioned into hardware and then we transitioned into career advice. It's just a testament as to how we can.
Hey, Joff, you know what he's doing?
The roads we can go down in the show.
We're fluid. We're fluid. And
he's acting like it's his show again.
With that, we're going to take a short break, come back, and talk about the security news for this week.